Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Shape Your Future webinar. I am Camille Thompson. I run the STELR program here at the Academy of Technology and Engineering. And as we gather for this meeting from different places around Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we meet. I'm joining you today from Ngunnawal and Ngambri land, which is in Canberra. I pay respect to our elders past and present and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us online today. As we share and discuss our own knowledge and practices, we acknowledge the deep knowledge forever embedded in custodianship of country. Now, today we have another exciting STEM career professional with us. Jessica Pritchard works in stats analysis, but she's going to tell you how she's used those skills in a variety of settings. So maths is all not boring. If you'd like to have a question at any time, please use the Q&A spot at the bottom of your screen and not the chat. We'll be able to see them, and Jess will either answer it during or we'll do it at the Q&A session at the end. And there are no silly questions. All questions are good questions. So without any further plug from me, let's hear from Jess, who is with us today. Morning, Jess.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. So just wanted to say good morning to everyone, and just to kick off. So as Camille said, my name is Jessica. I'm a mathematician. I studied a Bachelor of Mathematics at the University of Newcastle. So I've never been a statistician or a mathematician at work. I've been an analyst, demand coordinator, operations superintendent, customer service manager, but none of those really scream mathematician. And it's more that it's so many just opportunities when you choose STEM, and it's not really just about spending all your day looking at an Excel spreadsheet. It's actually about solving problems. So in a previous life, I was customer service manager at WestTrac, which is the big Caterpillar dealer. So the big yellow pieces of equipment you see on the side of the road. And I had a bit of a tricky problem, which I was trying to solve using maths. So I'll give you guys an example. If I go home tonight and I want to order a pizza, it'll take about 10 minutes to cook, 20 minutes to deliver. I can watch it minute by minute on my tracker, and I can have one in about 30 minutes. So let's imagine for a second that actually takes 6 months to cook and 1 month to deliver. So if I wanted a pizza tonight, I would have had to have ordered it last August, which isn't great because I really know what I want for dinner one day at a time. So there's a few ways we can tackle this problem. So I could order my pizza now and wait 7 months for it, but I'd be pretty hungry by then and I probably would have gotten something else to eat. Could just order a lot of pizzas, having them lying around ready for whenever I wanted one. Problem is, a lot of those would be likely rotten by the time I wanted to eat them. I'd be wasting a lot of time and money. Wouldn't really have a huge amount of fridge or freezer space. It was a little bit more cleverer. I could look at how frequently I've ordered pizzas in the past and then continue to order them at the same average frequency. Problem is sometimes I really want pizza a lot, and then other times I don't really want it for a while. So the risk is I may not have pizza exactly when I want it. So that's the problem have been dealing with at CAT before. So instead of a pizza, it's a complicated part for one of our excavators. So parts often wear out or break on excavators, and it's really hard to predict when this will happen. Could be once a month or several times in the same week. Customers want replacement parts in 24 hours, and it costs millions of dollars per day to stop operations on a mine site. Parts are manufactured in Germany, which means it can take a long time to deliver them. And due to the technical sophistication of the parts, they're pretty tricky to manufacture. Using the same methods as before to try and solve our problem. So we could make the customer wait seven months for their parts to arrive. Wouldn't be very happy about this because there's a very high cost for shutdowns and likely to go elsewhere for parts. They could order a lot of spare parts when ones just need replacing and have them lying around. But spare parts are expensive, they can corrode and become damaged if they're left in storage for a long period of time. And it also costs a lot of money to have space to store all these excess parts. Lastly, we could order parts at regular schedule. That works well, but it quite often leaves us with either a surplus or shortage of parts due to the irregular need for replacements. So how can we ensure that we have enough spare parts available for customers without having such a large surplus that the parts become unusable by the time we need them? We don't always have the right solution as yet, but as you can see, every decision we're making is based on maths and is based on numbers. And again, even though I'm not a mathematician in my day-to-day work, would never be classified as one, it is just how do we solve these tricky problems? So I think with that example, I'm just trying to illustrate the background that if you have a degree in one of the STEM subjects, what are the opportunities you have out there? Can be quite clear, you know, if you go to uni as an example and do a commerce degree, you become an accountant, degree in medicine, you become a doctor, but a STEM degree, it's not as clear what the career path is, but there's just so many options out there. So using that example at WestTrac, which is, say, a fairly traditional industry, but how many decisions are there that are made through maths and statistics is really interesting. My current role developed from customer service manager at WestTrac and then pricing manager at WestTrac. So as pricing manager, we were using maths and statistics to try and predict how we would fix excavators. So if you think the really big ones, you can buy a new excavator or you can bring one in and essentially get it rebuilt. So what we were doing was originally getting mechanics over them and working out what parts we needed, how long it was going to take us, and we'd quote it up. This was a very time-consuming process, and you're looking at $3 million per rebuild as an example. And what we started to do is use maths and numbers. So we would continuously rebuild these excavators, but we'd re-quote it every single time, like you would with a car being serviced. So we started to look at different ways to use the data we had to work on the frequency of what parts needed to be replaced. And what this meant was we could actually quote a lot quicker, which was important in a pretty competitive market. That if you've got someone that has an excavator they want rebuilt, we want them to come to us to do that. So what we started to do was measure the frequency of parts and how long on average it used to take us to rebuild these things. And using those to actually quote the cost of excavators. So using statistics, frequencies, means, averages, standard deviations, so the risk, and to actually make that quote. So for an example, if we had a large part that was very expensive, but we only replaced it every now and again, we wanted to build that into our model so that we weren't caught short when it did replace. And it did break on some of these machines we were quoting. So again, it was able to use those maths and stats and numbers and really try and replicate what our mechanics were doing on the ground so we could quote faster and get those out, because we knew the more we quoted, the more work we won. And obviously, that can be quite important. My current role, though, is at the New South Wales government. I work for Transport for New South Wales, and I'm Senior Manager Operations. And for me, I manage the northern region in New South Wales, so that's from Sydney up to the border. So it won't be much of a surprise. We've been pretty busy the last couple of weeks, my team as well. Again, doesn't scream mathematician or statistician, but my operations team has been out assisting with the floods and getting roads back open. And while it doesn't seem like road closures and things like that are necessarily maths or statistics based, what we were doing was really measuring the amount of capacity we had on our road network. So as you could see, there was some significant issues in Casino, Lismore. We had no capacity to get people in and out by roads, which was obviously incredibly important for emergency services and regular freight goods, Woolworths, Coles being able to come in. So we were measuring and reporting on what was the access to these major roads and how people can move in and out. It was a very, again, STEM based. So not only was it my team that was out there working on getting capacity back up. So we've got 100% of the capacity. That's great. You've got every road open. Everyone's happy. But in some of those areas, it was down to 0%. So not only was it myself and my team doing the operations plus that measurement, we also had other STEM of geotechnical engineers out reviewing bridges to make sure that they were still safe. So it's not unfortunately as simple as just lifting a barrier up and a road's open. It was making sure what was underneath was really safe. Having a lot of skill sets, as you say, from the engineers and the technical solutions team, being able to review how much water was on the road, what damage that caused, and what was the likelihood of anything going wrong. And using that information to get some capacity back into our road network so that people were able to then start accessing areas they need to, and we were able to send resources and equipment where it needed to be. So from the start and the end, even though, technically it wouldn't be described as a STEM piece of work, when you start looking into it, the amount of work we had and very different technical skill sets being available to get these roads reopened. So you had obviously the operations team and my team doing a lot of reporting on what our capacity is, finding our pinch points. Obviously, some were quite obvious, but what did we need to look at there? But then stepping into some of the other technological solutions of an engineering and geotechnical. So the engineering for major bridges that have been underwater for days, what was their condition? Could they be used? And then geotech. So we've had numerous landslides in the northern New South Wales area, and having the ability to send some of our technicians out to review what was the likelihood of more happening and looking at different areas where there have been significant landslips to make that difference. So it does sort of start to technically see that those STEM sorts you've got, even if it's not logically, you're not sitting there writing your sums out or anything like that, where these skill sets can really impact people and their lives. So we're using these skills to get the right access back into the road network, helping people that have been impacted by floods and making sure things are safe. So one example we had, which also links into excavators, which, as you know, is one of my favorite topics, is a significant piece of highway. What they've found through previous floods is roads tend to stay closed longer because the mud and the sediment sinks to the bottom. So it's all very science. So what we did were we had some excavators available. And what we did was, even when the road was still under a fair bit of water, we would send the excavators up and down the road, essentially swishing the water. I'm sure there's a more technical term, but to stop the sediment and the mud going down, so that as soon as the water disappeared, we were able to then open the road a lot quicker. Whereas previous times we've just waited for the water to recede and we've had a layer of mud we needed to clear off before cars and trucks can go through safely. But what we were able to do and find was using these excavators to move the water around and reduce that amount of sediment settling on the road. It was a couple of days worth of these excavators just driving up and down the M1. But as soon as the water did recede, we were able to then get the highway opened a lot faster than we had previously. So again, it's that use of science and knowing that how that's going to work from a practical perspective to really look at some different techniques we have with clearing up roads, which you wouldn't necessarily think as you're driving along, seeing an excavator paddling along, that would be that impact. So I think, again, from that example, it's really the broadness of STEM and where you can actually start using these skills. I know there's plenty of options for, in academic and extra research, but the skill sets that you need and public and private sector now is getting some people that have these skill sets available and being able to apply them to different opportunities. So whether it is cleaning up floods, one of the other good examples I had where it was very analytics based for something you wouldn't was in my experience as customer service manager at WestTrack, was again using the metrics for customer experience. So we had really low customer experience scores. So it was a bit tough, but and you'd sort of think normally that customer experience or customer satisfaction is probably a little bit more touchy-feely than necessarily looking at numbers, because if you walk into an Apple store or David Jones and you don't have a great customer experience, it may not be, you may have gotten your product, you may have paid a good price for it, but it was your feeling about it. But what we were able to do is really measure things like length of time in our call center, did you get the part you needed, all this sort of work to really start looking at the numbers that affected customer satisfaction. So we found, as an example, if you waited more than 30 seconds, it didn't matter then if you waited 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. If you were longer than 30 seconds, you were not happy. So if you had to wait 5, that was no different as waiting 1 minute. As long as it was over 30 seconds, you were unhappy. So we were able to use that data to really staff up at our bigger times. So through the middle of the day, we used to get a lot of calls, and know that because our waiting time used to blow out over lunch, because everyone would take the opportunity to call for their parts, what could we do to really shorten those waiting times? And we did actually see, even though everyone was still getting their parts and there was no change in price or anything pragmatic, because they weren't waiting for that amount of time, we were able to see some really quick shifts in our customer satisfaction score. And being able to use some of those metrics and data to really drive towards customer satisfaction, customer experience, and see that difference. Because using maths and stats, it wasn't that, oh, this customer just was grumpy and they had a bad day or whatever it happened to be. It was actually going, okay, these are 5 things that we do, which every time they happen, we're more likely to get a negative customer satisfaction or negative customer feedback. So what can we do to those 5 key metrics, which was waiting time, bit of parts availability, and a few things like that, to really make that difference to customer experience. Again, not necessarily something you'd instantly go to maths and stats, but using that skill set, what does that mean to actually drive a different outcome for customers as well? Because it's all not necessarily, I'm not there as a statistician or 100% of my time doing that sort of work, but having that skill set, being able to clearly communicate why that's important to people really does make a difference. And having the skill set is like a really good thing just to have in your back pocket while you can move between all these different careers and different opportunities within STEM. So I think that's about it from my perspective. I think Camille had some questions, but I'm happy to also take questions from the floor as well.
It's a really great take on, moving your STEM skills around in so many different ways. You've used the same skills in all the positions that you've had, which is great. So I did have a kind of setup question is what attracted you to work with WestTrac in the beginning? It's kind of big machinery and things like that. So what kind of got you in at the start of it?
Yeah, I think for me, it was the really interesting opportunity for customer service manager. And I also think they were looking for something a bit different. So I'm not going to lie, I was the first female operations manager there as well. So they didn't have managers that looked like me, that had pink hair or anything like that. So I think the opportunity it was a good chance to hop in and make some change into an organisation. But yeah, good place to work. And again, something you wouldn't necessarily look at as a particular statistics-based role, but it gave me a lot to learn. I now know more about excavators than I've ever wanted to. So good way to see that. But yeah, looking at those options from WestTrac and seeing, that plus the impact of being able to work with Caterpillar, which is obviously a big global company as well, was the real attraction to working there.
Yeah, it's huge. I really want to drive one of those things. I don't know why, just in the back of my brain. So did you actually get a lot of chances to be out in the field where these machinery was working and the outputs of what you were doing, say back at an office? Could you see where the outputs were when you were working in a company like that? Or even now?
Yeah, look, I think definitely now at Transport we use them a lot, so it's good to see that they're still scooting about. Definitely out on the mine sites was a big one, and I think just the actual size of the equipment and size of what they're looking to do. So Caterpillar also did longwalls, which is used in underground mining to mine underground, funnily enough, and how they run against the seams of coal and pull those. So it was the size of the equipment, and I think also what was really, and you can see that impact, and I think also the dollars involved in some of these, and I wasn't joking when I said you stop a mine for half a day, you're looking at millions of dollars in lost production. So I think you can sort of understand why people do get a little bit stressy if they can't get their parts as well, because we are looking at such a big financial impact to people.
Yes, it's very kind of far removed from what a lot of us have connection with. I guess the mines are out in, remoter areas. They're digging up the holes and where most of us are. So I guess you said you were the first female operations manager. Was that a difficult was that difficult for you? Or people kind of accepting of the change you were bringing in, not just through the gender thing, but also, as you say, you wanted to make some changes? Were they just come up against some walls or?
Yeah, so my first day at WestTrac, I was sitting in the office of the old customer service manager. I had the same office, moved into it. I had a gentleman come to visit me, said, "Oh, hello, I'm so-and-so." I said, "Hi." He said, "Oh, so are you a new PA for the new customer service manager?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm actually her." So that was a bit of a, considering that was not that like a couple of years ago, you sort of wouldn't expect that. Lovely people, but it was a bit different. I think it probably was the first experience in my career where I felt I've really had not a disadvantage, I guess, but that I really felt different. I think it was also a very technical role. So historically, you sort of go through the normal career path of an apprentice to workshop supervisor, and then come up into the office for these sort of roles. Obviously, I didn't have that background and I'd come in external. And I think that was a bit of a challenge for me, is being able to pick up enough technical nuance that I had credibility with my team. So even though, I've got degrees and, I had other experience within operations, all this sort of stuff, but I think I had to be pretty considerate that that wasn't seen as much value as necessarily had I worked at Westrac for the 15 years prior. And that wasn't really, an individual experience of, this person or anything, but I think the value, I think for me, it was a good learning, because it sort of taught me that I had to make sure that I did build that credibility and learn really quickly on things that I wasn't necessarily as comfortable with. I was never a kid that played with excavators or trucks or anything like that. I was very much a Barbie girl. And I think for me, you've got people there that literally grew up on trucks and excavators, and that's why they wanted to work there. So for them to have someone walking going, I'm pretty sure that's kind of a D11, it might be facing the right way, was a bit of a shock to their system. But it was also, for me, learning to build that credibility and work with different people, because it's great to have all these great STEM ideas and bring in all that different, but if you can't actually work with people or communicate it, does tend to fall over pretty quickly. So
yeah, got to get people behind it. So at high school, did you love maths? Were you kind of new? What was some of the things you really enjoyed doing at high school?
Yeah, I was good at maths. I was a bit at a loss, to be honest, when I finished year 12, what I wanted to do. I was clever, like I got good results. I liked going to school, things like that, but I just didn't really have a clear career direction. Medicine was out because I passed out a lot of blood, things like that. So I sort of honestly went on a bit of a more, okay, these are things I don't want to do. What does it leave me with? And part of it was a little bit of that. I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be locked into a career, which is how I ended up studying maths. So I actually did a double degree. So I did a Bachelor of Mathematics and a BA, Bachelor of Arts. And it really gave me a lot of opportunities when I came out of uni, because not only did I have the maths and statistics background, which is nice, really nice grounding for a lot of roles, but the BA sort of did also then teach you a bit of communication skills. And back to what I was just saying in regards to Westrac, the most important thing is, yeah, it's great if you're academic and you're clever and you've got all these skills, but if you can't communicate that, it does start to make it a little bit tricky. So being able to have that mix of skill set, I think, is really important, because it does open a lot of doors for you, that you've got that background, but again, being able to work with people and talk to it. I'm sure, there's plenty of people that could, to the nth degree, explain to me how a plane works and stays in the air to a level of detail that I, in my life, would never need to know. But how do you actually communicate that in such an interesting manner that you want people to understand as well? And I think that's a real skill set for people in STEM, that if you've got that nice mix of both, which a lot of students do now coming through, because you get such a great grounding through school and university, then it really does put you in a great position to have a lot of different options going forward. Because again, 10 years into your career, it is sometimes nice to have a bit of the opportunity to switch industries or change it up a little bit. And a lot of those STEM careers gives you that option.
It does, and it gives you, that breadth of skills, as you say, to talk about it to anyone about anything. Is all those speeches the teachers make you do at school that I hated. All comes down at the end of it. So, is there a piece of advice you would give your high school self? Thinking back.
Oh, look, probably a few bits, but I'm not sure if they're all appropriate for this forum. To be honest, no. Look, I think just. Do what you enjoy. I think that is important. And if you're sitting in here and listening to me talk, going, oh, great, mum and dad would love me to do a STEM career, but your heart is in music, do what makes you happy. Your career goes for a long time. I think it would just be, make sure that you're working on things that you enjoy and you get passion out of. Obviously music can be very mathematical as well, but I think for me, the advice to any students is it's making sure that you're doing things that you enjoy and you get joy out of, because it does, it makes it a long life sometimes if you're getting up in the morning to do something that isn't your passion, and you've done it because, you know, your parents did it, or someone suggested you needed to do it, or, you know, you got really good results, so felt you should go into medicine, but it turns out that's not your passion, or if you're like me, pass out the side of blood. It's making sure that you're doing what works for you. But I think for me, it's really just highlighting that sometimes STEM doesn't get highlighting that there is plenty of career opportunities there that may not be as obvious at first look. So I think that's my mixed advice in there somewhere.
And this is my personal question I love asking people is what do you do when you're not doing your science? What are the things you do outside of your job in science?
I've got 2 little boys, a 4 and a 6-year-old. One's delightful, one's a terror. But they keep me on my toes. But I'm currently the age manager for an under 6 nippers out at the beach at Newcastle, so that keeps me pretty well out of trouble. So that's a good counting. So if you've got 12 kids to start with, make sure you end up with 12 at the end of the lesson as well. So for me, it's just really chasing some little ones around.
Can you stand up on a surfboard?
No. The worst Novocastrian you've ever met. It's a rite of passage here, and never been able to pick it up. So,
well, we've got other skills that are really good with your STEM and your maths, and we're looking forward to all those Northern Rivers roads being open and used, and everybody out doing what they should be doing. Dealing with mud and sludge, which is really bad. So thank you for joining us today, Jessica. It's been really great listening to you talk about your lovely different path for STEM, and this series is supported by the Victorian Challenge and Enrichment series, and we are on every week in school terms, and the recordings are all available on the STELR YouTube channel. Please fill out our feedback survey that you'll receive after this webinar and let us know what we can do better and who else you'd like to see. But for now, I will say thank you, Jessica.